Hello and welcome to the lecture on social interaction. In today's lecture, we shall try and understand the patterns of social interaction in human beings. We shall also understand the different contexts in which social interaction takes place. Also, we shall familiarize students with the micro-sociological elements like ethnomethodology, symbolic interactionism, and dramaturgy. And finally, we shall give the brief account of different types of social interaction. First of all, let us understand social interaction in detail. It is undeniable fact that every living being has a specific pattern of communication. However, lack of ability of speech, except humans, keeps its behaviors in restricted domain. Their needs are only confined to satiate their instincts, so are their communication skills. Instead, human communication is extremely complex and highly evolved because of their tremendous cognitive ability and power of articulation. Since times immemorial, human societies have kept on evolving and becoming more developed and more complex. If we ponder over the reason which has led to the phenomenal changes that have been continuously taking place in human societies, the reason is explicit. Men are able to put across their thoughts clearly than any other living creatures would be able to do. This art of putting across one's thoughts through various means like speech, body language, eye contact, etc. is known as interaction. If the term social is attached to the word interaction, it becomes social interaction, which in itself is a vast topic to be discussed. Nevertheless, innumerable attempts have been made by different sociologists to give precise and comprehensible description of the term social interaction. Social interaction is a process where two or more people are engaged in verbal or non-verbal communication, seek each other's response, and are mutually oriented towards each other, signifying that each individual has to be aware of other interaction partner or partners. The mutual orientation between partners might either be deliberate or unconscious. To understand the functioning of societies and how individual behavior gets affected through social interaction in different micro-sociological approaches like symbolic interactionism, ethnomethodology, and dramaturgy have been put forth by renowned sociologists, Erving Goffman and Harold Garfinkel. Depending on the context or situation, social interaction can be of diverse forms. Major categories include social interaction through verbal communication and social interaction through non-verbal communication. These categories are further divided into subcategories. Our societies are the products of a continuous process which has been there since the advent of human steps on this earth, of social interaction. This process is more than that of an animalistic behavior. It is through social interaction that societies, norms, ethos, rules are designed. Social structures such as institution of marriage, family, friendship, love relations, etc. are all created through social interaction. Since social interaction being the social exchange between two or more people, individuals modify their behavior in accordance to the behavior of their interaction partners. Though speech is an essential way of conveying our message across the members of a given society, however, there are certain symbols that are also used to communicate the expectations of societies to those individuals who are novel to it or to a child who is in learning stage. Hence, the inferences can be drawn that social interaction forms a core of any given society. We are inseparable from our societies and consequently our behaviors are subject to actions of our interaction partners. Examples of social interaction can be the school children chatting during their lunch break. Rivals on the sports ground mocking at each other can also serve as an example of social interaction. Two colleagues in an office not in talking terms deliberately ignoring each other is an example of implicit social interaction. The eye contact between the lovers is also a form of social interaction. Various definitions of social interaction have been put forth. Social interaction is a dynamic sequence of social actions between individuals or groups. Social interaction is the act, action, or practice of two or more people mutually oriented towards each other. Social interaction is the ability of two or more social beings to come into contact, communicate, or acknowledge one another while each being is aware of the other and keep them in mind when performing any action. Social actions or social behaviors which are directly or indirectly addressed to other people and solicit response from them are termed as social interaction. Before proceeding further, let's discuss elements of social interaction in detail. Based on observations made and experiments conducted, sociologists have endeavored to study the social interaction through the perspectives of symbolic interactionism and ethnomethodology, which are subjects of microsociology. Irving Goffman described the social interaction through the metaphor of theatre called dramaturgy. Now let's talk about symbolic interactionism. It is the term coined by Herbert Blumer, a student of George Herbert Mead. Mead held the view that members of society are social products who are productive and purposeful. Symbolic interactionism is important for discipline of sociology and its branches like microsociology and social psychology. According to Herbert Blumer, individuals' orientation towards things is based on how these things are projected or what they mean, and social interaction gives meaning to them, which are eventually modified through interpretation. Symbolic interactionist approach views reality as social, developed interaction with others. According to various symbolic interactionists, individuals' social definition certainly explains physical reality, and that social definitions develop in accordance to something real. Hence, it is clear that people do not perceive this reality directly, but through social understanding. Symbolic interactionists observe that individuals and societies form two sides of the same coin, and both of these are created through social interaction. Consequently, it will not be possible to understand one without the other. Herbert Blumer in 1969 set out three basic premises of the symbolic interactionism perspective. Number one, humans act towards things on the basis of the meaning they ascribe to these things. Number two, the meaning of such things is derived from or arises out of the social interaction that one has with others and the society. And number three, these meanings are handled in and modified through an interpretative process used by the person in dealing with the things he or she encounters. Now, dear students, let's talk about ethnomethodology. It is a concept established by Harold Garfinkel and Harvey Sachs. With the development of ethnomethodology, a seminal and viable field of inquiry opened for sociology. Ethnomethodology, being a subject of microsociology, studies the minute aspects like practices and procedures performed by members of a society to produce and maintain sense of orderliness within a community or institutions. The function of ethnomethodologist is to document the techniques and processes through which the members of the society understand the logic of their words. Garfinkel held the view that ethnomethodology is an apt expression to scrutinize a member's knowledge of his ordinary affairs of his organized enterprises, treated by researchers as part of the same setting that makes it orderable. He exemplified it by taking into account the procedures carried out by jurors who work on certain instances, saying that ethnomethodologists would solicit to explain the ways of common sense through which members of jury turn out in a jury room, where they would set up matters of fact, create chains of proof, decide the trustworthiness of evidence, then conclude the guilt or innocence of a convict. This is the exact order of procedure in accordance of which jurors work, whether cautiously or uncautiously. Annie Rawls, editor of Garfinkel's Nachlass, said that ethno plus method plus ology means the study of members' methods for producing recognizable social order. She illustrated the basic postulation of ethnomethodological studies as members of society must have some shared methods that they use to mutually construct the meaningful orderliness of social situations. Ethnomethodologists adopt the stance of agnosticism or indifference towards the manner in which sociologists analyze the social order. Their agnosticism only refers to see the social concerns as members of society would see them for the first time. It is because they want to see how an observer would explain a social activity in a given situation which is taking place for the very first time, though it might be a routine happening. At times, ethnomethodology seems to contradict the traditional sociology, as ethnomethodology studies the social practices of real people in real setting and takes into account the methods and objective truth of social order, which is being ignored by the traditional sociology. Now coming to another element of social interaction, that is dramaturgy. It is a concept developed by Erving Goffman, paralleled the real life with the theatre. In his 1959 seminal text, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, he has compared our lives with the theatre, where performer performs for the audience to describe the human behavior. In a similar way, as in a theatre, every individual in a society acts as a performer and social setting or other members of society are its audience. Social setting where performance of an individual can be viewed or is visible is referred to as front stage. And when an individual is not visible to the audience and preparing for front stage through contemplation is regarded as backstage. Examples of front stage and backstage is a marriage ceremony in Indian context, where backdrop of preparations of reception of bridegroom and his relatives can be regarded as backstage, and when the reception of bridegroom takes place, the bride and the relatives have submissive attitudes and happily fulfill the demands of bridegroom and his relatives. Those demands may be detestable otherwise. The identity and behavior of the members of society are subject to the audience or their society. Thus, individuals or performers manipulate their impression on the audience or the viewers. They try to influence their perception the audience have and try to make audience opine about them, that is the performers, as they wish to them. The presentation of one's self is expressed through the performance, and every individual attempts to create a specific impression in the minds of other people. And this is done through social interaction, and the process is known as impression management. Performer's performance becomes a success when audience view the performer according to the performer's wish. Hence, society and its members are inseparable, and the behavior of individuals is shaped according to the social situation. Since social situation keeps on changing, so the roles of an individual also change. An individual may play a single role at a time or can have several roles to play simultaneously. Therefore, society and individuals' sense of identity are interrelated, where individual or performer is always aware of evaluative work done on him by the audience or society, thereby making him or her conscious of his or her actions. Performer thus modifies or corrects his or her behavior so that the authenticity of his or her performance is not questioned. Now let's discuss the types of social interaction. Social interaction can be categorized into two types: non-verbal communication and verbal communication. Let's first discuss non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication is when the thoughts, messages and ideas communicated across the people without the literal speech. Various types of non-verbal communication being observed are non-verbal communication through our clothing and style. Firstly, our clothes reflect our social position and economic status. Next, we dress ourselves according to the occasion. For example, if we put on casuals, that indicates we have nothing important to attend. And when we are in formals, it signifies that we are either at workplace or attending some meeting or some important function. There is also a notion among most of the people that our outfits are mirrors of our intellect. Next, non-content parts of speech like a quality of voice, volume, intonation, stress, pitch, etc. also form a part of non-verbal communication. For example, if any person utters a word, "come on," in one context it simply is a command where a person asks someone to come. However, if in other context with its changed intonation means that a person does not comply with what his or her interaction partner says. Next, the meaning of gestures, posture and body language vary according to the context. The facial expression, movement of the eyes, lips, nose and position and types of movement of arms, shoulders, hands all come under the category of gesture. Same gesture can be offensive in one context but common in another. Every gesture signifies specific meaning, but they vary from society to society. However, some of them are universal, like waving our hands to and fro either means hello or goodbye in both Indian and Western contexts. Body language and postures also make a good deal of influence on our communication. For example, slouching posture indicates that a person is carefree and lazy. Similarly, in Indian context, short stature is associated with increased wit and agility, and height, though, is considered a sign of beauty, but along with sluggishness and low wit. Social exchange theory, which is understood in terms of rational choice theory, says that there is a kind of symbiosis between the individuals or parties, which means that the exchange in a relationship, be it a material exchange or an emotional exchange, is beneficial for the parties or individuals and running the society smoothly. In the social exchange theory, the parties in a relationship must be reciprocal in their actions. The parties or individuals will maintain their relationship till they feel that the exchange is worth the cost. Social exchange theory is sociological perspective which supports rational choice theory that says that all human behaviors are guided by what the individuals perceive is in their best interest. Social exchange theory holds the view that it is in one's own interest to form relationships which are also essential for functioning of societies. Exchange also brings about changes in societies and makes them more advanced. Next is cooperation. When people work together in the groups or two or more to attain some goal, they are said to be in cooperation. Next is conflict theory. It maintains that conflict is also an essential part of social interaction, where competition between the parties or individuals takes place to take the control of scarce resources. After the resource comes into the control of a particular party, then the party is not likely to release its control. This practice is known as the Matthew effect. And the last one, socio-class. It indicates how powerful an individual is by virtue of his or her social position, or how much wealth does he or she possesses. These attributes come to an individual either by birth, that is in the form of his or her family, or he earns them over the certain period of time. German sociologist Max Weber said that socio-economic status of an individual is an important factor that affects his or her way of social interaction. The other elements of social interaction are culture, role conflict, social institutions, virtual worlds, etc., that lay considerable degree of impact on the kind of social interaction in which individuals are engaged. Before I take your leave, let us quickly recap what we have discussed today. We learned that social interaction is a dynamic sequence of social actions between individuals or groups. It is through social interaction that societies, norms, ethos, rules are designed. Social structures such as institution of marriage, family, friendship, love relations, etc. are all created through social interaction. Further, we discussed sociologists have endeavored to study the social interaction through the perspectives of symbolic interactionism and ethnomethodology, which are subjects of microsociology. Irving Goffman described the social interaction through the metaphor of theatre called dramaturgy. At last, we discussed different categories of social interaction. That's all with today's lecture. I hope you understood it well. Thank you.